Okay, that's very good indeed. We're now leading to the feast of the day, the report from the Chief Executive and the Chief Group Financial Officer. Who is where?
We'll just follow up with the CFO. Ross is unwell and dialing in, so you probably expect he'll appear very shortly. Failing that, I'm going to throw Michael Burns in the hot seat. I'll start though, if that's right, Your Worship.
Please do.
So if, I'm going to be quicker than normal today. And part of the reason for that is that the figures around for the quarter ending the end of March are not available to us in this time frame. They'll be coming through shortly. I'll come down to what forecasts are looking like for the end of year result though for you in a moment. Quite a few things to record with you, most of which you're aware, but for the record, the Auckland deal signed, and now we're in a process of planning the implementation of a range of things that are in there. What was that?
Process of reminding them that we've signed it.
Indeed. So it's good to be at that point where we've got an arrangement signed off. It requires us to have some governance and some program management apparatus around this and bring a discipline to implementation of the commitments in there. So that's the place we're at the moment. The big and most time-consuming thing at the moment, however, is the transport reform. Obviously, the third reading passing of the legislation last week is a critical moment in this whole process, just waiting for the royal assent. I think we're still waiting for the royal assent. But we haven't paused a range of implementation activities around this. So on Thursday, and as I briefed you a week or so ago, would happen on Thursday, we released the change proposal that outlines how we set up the public transport CCO, the structure, the roles and so forth, and how we set up arrangements within the council organisation for the balance. So we're on track for that, but it has been and will continue to be a monumental piece of work with a lot of people involved, and I just pause to acknowledge the effort that's gone on both within AT and within the change team that's been working on this. You have also adopted the transport policy, and obviously that starts to drive decision making at a strategic level in terms of and we've got to set the regional transport committee up and begin work on the regional transport plan and so on. So we've got that aspect of the apparatus being worked on as well. Probably the other thing I would mention in terms of an immediate focus is around the roading classification framework leading into the allocation of decision making for local boards and governing body, and getting that machinery set up, and just acknowledgement to councillors Baker and Henderson for getting out around the local boards and having those conversations, and your input back into the process is much appreciated. I won't go through in a public environment any more detail around the specific changes. Best left till after Thursday when they're broached with staff. Suffice to say that we're getting everyone ready for that now. I've met this morning with the senior leadership ranks at Auckland Transport to go through it. And that's about getting people in a leadership role prepared for the implementation of that, or socialising that change for consultation purposes later in the week. Operationally, things are pretty much on course in terms of performance metrics and what have you. Later this month, I have a formal quarterly scorecard report to the Appointments and Performance Committee. If you're in the really sad position of not having enough to do that day and you're not on that committee, I commend that to you if you want to get a fairly fulsome performance report on how things are going in your relationship with me as Chief Exec. However, just to manage understanding of where we're at in the financial year, we continue to forecast a favourable end-of-year position in terms of operating expenditure, in terms of revenue, in terms of the savings targets being met, and from a council point of view in terms of the capital program, where I think the forecast completion against budget's about 93%. There is some forecasts to talk about when we get to the budget committee in the water care and transport space. Water care probably sitting at about 90% and transport about 80% completion against their capital program for the year to 30 June. So I'll save that discussion for when we have the fulsome numbers in front of you after the third quarter numbers are ready. Look, the final thing I just wanted to mention, and I will invite Parul up, if you don't mind, Parul, and others who are here for the fuel supply discussion. We took the decision to incorporate an update on fuel supply matters into this CE report, it's covered off in a memo that you've received, but I'll just welcome Parul to speak to this. I just wanted to note that we've quite deliberately focused on the impacts operationally in the organisation and what we can do in the immediate future. There is, of course, broader aspects to this in terms of resilience around energy, both at a community level and for the organisation, climate change drivers and such like. So we could make this discussion as big as folk want, but we've deliberately focused in on the organisation impacts in the here and now. So Parul, and then after Parul, we'll, and I see Ross has appeared, so we'll do the financial report after that.
Kia ora koutou. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the team and the group that has come together to work on this. So we established a working group to come together, which is not just council, but the group, to make sure that we were across what was happening in the fuel scenario, and also making sure that we were feeding back to government in terms of what information they require to make their decisions. We are still in a phase of the fact that government direction is still coming. They are also developing it as things change, and we are wanting to keep on top of it. The group has come up with a draft plan that we shared on Friday. It is a business continuity plan, as Phil said. It is to make sure that we as a group are able to respond to the different phases that the government has put forward in front of us. Currently, while we are in phase one, we are ensuring that we can take any action that is required to make sure people are aware, are taking the right steps to get their fuel consumption down, and also manage the cost impacts that are actually facing our communities. As the phases go up, and it's a question of when, and we do not know when that might happen, we want to ensure if fuel supply gets to that stage where it's rationed to us, we have got the right things in place to be able to do that. So as council and group, we will require to look at our own activities and how do we manage that. But we also have Auckland Emergency Management that will play in with NEMA to make sure they are playing their part as part of central government to help with the rationing part as well. I do have Richard here and Sarah here for any detailed questions on the plan. There is quite a bit of detail that sits behind it, as you can imagine, when we're trying to look at our own activities and going, should we keep this and should we stop this? There's a lot that needs to be thought through. The intention is for us to continue with services as much as possible so that the community is not impacted by what might be coming. So as far as we can, we will ensure that we can do it. But if it is mandated through government that we can't, then it's a different matter. And if we are to rush on, we then have to think about what do we continue doing and what do we don't do. So just a bit of a brief there in terms of how we've come up with the plan, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so any questions on any of that, very welcome, including the fuel aspect. Just one final note. Obviously, there is, as we've covered earlier, there is a financial impact to be discussed in relation to the annual plan flowing into next year. So that discussion's probably best left for that forum shortly. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Would you not agree that there is a complex tension behind full facilities contracts which are built on scale, and that usually those scale advantages are because they mobilise plant and staff across the larger area, compared to if we had local contractors, more locally based, with less of those fuel-related pressures?
I can try and address that question through the chair. I think what we have seen in other parts of the business, we do have large contracts. I would want to talk about the waste space. You can look at ways of managing the fuel consumption for the way you do the activities. And I know the current model that parks and facilities have, also work really closely with their suppliers to look at what aspects of their activities they can actually pause to impact that. So it can be done with a larger scale contractor as well.
With a second level of management, so I'll leave it at that for now, thank you.
If you don't actually top them up because of the diesel thing, they will be incentivised to drive left and be more smooth. If you top them up, they'll carry on roaring around. So don't top them up, please. Councillor Fuller. I've got you down here as an amazing computerised system here. That,
not for fuel.
Not for fuel, righto. Oh no, I am the reader of the buttons.
Sorry, that's not for the fuel though. That's.
We can take any other questions,
Kia ora.
Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah, you can add fuel to the fire by just asking a general question.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, ladies. I did put my hand up, but I was just going to ask about the Auckland deal. You know, we were told, or we understand that the fundamental part, well, one of the fundamentals of it is that we have a better, more open relationship with central government and open communication. But I just wanted to understand a little bit more about what happened with SailGP. Were we given a heads up at all? Because I share the frustration that the mayor had when that all unfolded. Kia ora.
I don't know, the mayor may wish to comment, but it's fair to say that we were not given a heads up and an opportunity to deal with that situation that came unstuck because of the government input. The mayor's across this and has communicated to the government more than once on this.
Yes, I think we're going to have to constantly remind them that they've signed this, particularly over the next few months. They easily forget it, or conveniently forget it. The SailGP was a disgraceful result, really, and it's possible that the Minister of Tourism was thinking along the lines of her Minister of Social Welfare roles, which didn't fit that well with tourism. Very disappointing, really, and so we did give them an uppercut on that, and hopefully we'll keep reminding. The whole point is that they have to tell us about stuff. There is another couple of things in there as well in terms of economic development and trips overseas and whether or not they should tell us before they're going and these things. And that hasn't worked particularly well either yet. But we will remind them, and I'm glad that you raised that question because it has been, and it was a bit underwhelming anyhow. And so we need them to at least hold to what we got. So thank you for that.
Your Worship, I'm not doing a very good job here. I wonder if we might hear from Ross and then complete the questions just for
Is Ross there? Ah, there he is. Handsome fellow. Come on.
Yeah, apologies, I can't be there in person, just got a cold and flu, don't want to spread the germs around. Just on the financials, I'll be brief. I think Phil's talked about most of it. Current year is looking good, as Phil said. We're expecting to be cost and revenue both favourable. CapEx will be under budget. Next year is looking tight. As Phil said, that will be discussed through the budget committee. Things were looking good in terms of the annual budget, $50 million gap in the local board funding gaps. That is largely solved, but we now have these fuel costs are likely to hit to some extent for next year, but the extent of that is still highly uncertain. Some decisions will have to be made through the budget committee on that, because the CapEx budget, even at 80 to 90% delivery, the cumulative impact of just a little bit under delivered against LTP kind of does add up to a bit of a bit less spend, a bit less debt, and therefore that should help with interest costs. So a little bit of higher fuel costs, a little bit of lower interest. We think we can make things with a few other adjustments. We can work through some of those fuel impacts. I think the key thing for next year is, because it is uncertain, we're going to have to keep a close eye on things. And I think these kind of monthly updates and the monthly reporting will become quite key. And it may be that if things are higher for longer, we need to come back to you over the course of next year, and we may need to make some other changes as things play out, depending on what happens. Looking further ahead for the long-term plan, this is where the economic situation, what geopolitical events mean for inflation, global interest rates, all those things becomes a bit more uncertain, and that could become a much more sort of challenging operating environment and create budget challenges for us. That's something we have to keep an eye on through the LTP process. One thing that makes it a little bit harder is impacts on credit rating. So just touch on that briefly. So as we've advised councillors previously and the market via the NZX, as a consequence of Moody's downgrading the sovereign rating, putting the sovereign rating onto negative outlook, I should say, Moody's have also decided to put Auckland Council's very strong AA2 rating on negative outlook. So that is a direct consequence of the council's link to central government. There's a lot of revenue that comes from central government. There's a lot of close collaboration on infrastructure programs, water reform, etc. And the government sort of sits there as a key backstop. Rates capping also means that our finances will be more closely linked to central government going forward. So it's important to note that negative outlook is not a reflection of the council's financial management. It is all about the impact of the Crown's finances flowing through to council. We don't see any immediate impact on that. We've just done a large debt raise just immediately before the Iran conflict. We completed our largest debt raise of the year. So we're not going to the market in any sort of volume or size anytime soon, which is a good place to be. But over time, it may well add costs. And if over the next sort of year to 18 months, Moody's will think about, well, do they reaffirm the rating? Do they move to a downgrade? So that will depend on what they think of the central government's books. If there is a downgrade, that will start to add to interest costs, particularly in the long-term plan period. So something we're keeping an eye on carefully at the moment. Happy to take any questions on the financial elements.
I got one. Moody's specifically mentioned the rates cap. Do you think I should write to the government and point out that they're dragging us down because of the rates cap, which is just sort of an electioneering slogan anyhow, but it actually has a negative impact on our possible operating costs that they hadn't thought through. They'd thought that through as little as what President Trump thought about the consequences of invading Iran.
I mean, that's up to you how you want to engage politically with central government. I know that the government officials did talk to Standard and Poor's. I'm not sure if they spoke to Moody's, but it is very clear that things that are happening in the government space are having a negative impact on us and our outlook and our cost of debt. So it is a potential unintended consequence of policies such as rates capping and other government policies.
Teleferi has a question.
Kia ora, thank you. I have a couple of questions on the fuel issue and the city deal as well. Just do the city deal ones first, if that's okay, because they're probably a bit easier. One of the issues that's been raised with me is the mention in the deal wording of the Central Library potentially being used as a location for a future primary school, and that came as a surprise to the Waitemata Local Board, who have responsibility for the library. Obviously, that potentially calls out other community facilities that might get pulled into the mix of these kinds of conversations. So it'd be helpful to understand how that might happen with our community assets in the future, with some visibility on how that happened this time around, because that was a surprise.
Max to answer that because he was deviling in the detail.
And there he is.
Thank you, Mia. I think the first point to acknowledge is just to be clear about what the schedule actually says, which it uses the Central Library as an example of property, building as an example of property the council owns in the city centre, and responds to a request from the Crown that if our request was, can you please look at putting a school in the centre city? That's been a long-standing aspiration of the council in terms of enabling greater residential intensification in the city centre. And the Crown's response was, yes, could you look at whether a council has land which might be appropriate for a city centre school. And so the Central Library was used, building which has been discussed as the various options for that building have been discussed previously, as an example of land that the council owns, rather than the deal saying that there's an active consideration of that building becoming a school. So the first thing is just to sort of temper down suggestions that we have agreed through the deal that we would turn the Central City Library into a school. I think the other important point to make is that I suppose this is obvious, but the regional deal does in no way interferes with the normal decision-making processes of the council, and so any decision to do anything of that nature would need to go through the normal processes, which would certainly involve local board decisions in that particular case. So I think it was reflected in there. We repeated a number of times that we would have. We were somewhat constrained in the deal conversation by non-disclosure agreements and by timeframes, and so we were only able to bring information to the governing body and not to local boards. And a different process could have been used, but that was the process we were in. So I think it was used as an example. Any future decisions would any decision to progress that particular item would require fulsome engagement with the local board, as you would expect.
And that assurance has been given to the local board chair, correct, Max?
Yes.
Yep.
Right, good. Thank you. And then I guess my other question was, and this doesn't have a quick answer now, but signalling interest in how do we actually roll this deal out now? There are a number of work streams I'm particularly interested in, some of the growth corridor work that's been identified. When will we hear what that's going to look like, how councillors and other committees will be involved in the actual rolling out of those parts of it? as we progress.
As I mentioned, that's what we're working on right now, and I think in terms of managing expectations of when something might come back to you.
I've got someone in my office having a bit of a look at that, and we've discovered, as you usually do here, that whilst we can zone places to go 20 stories, all of our planning rules and building rules get in the road. And so we need to have some unification of the various rules that we've got all over the place so you can actually do these things. It's also part of what we're going to do with the standardisation at Auckland of AT's rules, which are different from NZTA's rules, which are different from our own planning rules, and which are different from what any normal person who can chew gum and walk would even dream up in some cases. So there is a bit of work to be done there, but we have, the more you look into innovative ways of building here, the more we have manufactured rules to prevent it. And so there is a bit of work being done there, and I'm taking the Chief Building Inspector out to show him ways of building things which are quite sensible but haven't really been heard of in that particular office.
Okay.
We'll talking with Max, we'll commit to having an initial roadmap in advance of the next governing body meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Then the few questions I've got. I guess the plan that's been produced is really helpful from a business continuity point of view, and understand that's largely the remit that was asked for. What I'm interested in too is how we take that a step further, not just in how we do our own business, but our role supporting Aucklanders to do their business, some of which is not business at all, is moving around the city, right? For a variety of purposes. So what I'm particularly interested in is the stuff on, I'm just going to find the page. Sorry, too many windows open. So in the memo that was sent, the page 27, stuff around Auckland Transport and the different phases there. So I'm particularly interested in the public transport and the buses around phase 2 and the opportunity there to do pop-up bus lanes to accelerate. So, for example, in my area, there's been consulted on and the consultation's complete, the decision's been made to extend bus lane hours on Dominion Road, and yet it's been months and it still hasn't happened. So there's a number of decisions, for example, that were already in flight, and now is the time to go, okay, we do them now. And as I say, pop-ups for phase 2. So what's the thinking there? You've got network efficiencies mentioned. I would see that as a network efficiency. Is that what's being thought of?
Yes, morning, exactly that. We've prepared a list of opportunities. So as you say, locations where we've already done the consultation, the designs are ready, and then there's an opportunity identified that we could speed up buses. So it's a timing thing of when would we put that in as either a trial or a pilot, which would let us do it faster than going through the full process.
Sorry, could I just ask you to bring the mic a little bit closer?
So sorry.
Thanks. That's okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So at the moment, because we're in phase 1, we're not moving into making those changes immediately. We've also got to watch the general traffic. So general traffic at the moment has been slightly down in April. I think it's been about 6 to 8% below expectations. So that's making it easier for buses to move anyway, because there are fewer cars on the road. So yeah, it's just trading off when would we be prioritising buses over cars, given there are still cars on the road. So that's why it's appropriate to go to phase 2. But we're ready, and we'd appreciate the support to get things through quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd support press and go on that as soon as possible, particularly with those ones that are already consulted and ready to go. The efficiency of those bus movements will lower their fuel use, and we know that that's one of our biggest fuel users.
It will help, and also cycle buses through trips faster, because they'll be the return journey will be faster, so we can increase the capacity. That's our focus at the moment, is the capacity management. With public transport boardings increasing, making sure we've got enough space for everybody.
Okay, so what do you need from us politically to help you press go on that stuff?
We'll come back to you when there's something that we feel we need to press go on when we see
Cool.
a need for it.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing in that space is hedging on fuel purchases. I have to admit, this is not something I know a lot about. And my understanding is that most of our fuel purchases, like, we're not directly buying fuel. We have contracts with people who are buying fuel, and I'm mindful of Ross's advice in the confidential session next week. I don't want to get into the detail of specific contracts. But do the businesses that we work with who are buying fuel to do stuff for us, are they hedging on fuel purchase? Is that something that they can do? I'm not sure who can answer that.
We may have to come back to you on that. I don't have that information.
Great. And then my final question, which is really more probably to the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. I'm aware there's these meetings with mayors around the country and stuff, talking with central government and with ministers. And I guess I'm looking for some assurance here around the advocacy that you're both bringing to those discussions, because while we're getting confirmation from government about supply in phase 3 and phase 4, we're not getting much comfort around price. And they are in a much better position than us to deal with price fluctuations. So what is the conversation happening there at the political level around the fact that government needs to give us some certainty around price? I'm not saying they need to give us certainty now that it's going to cost this much, but they need to make a commitment that the pain of the cost, because we'll be able to get fuel, we'll just have to pay a fortune for it, and it gets to a point where economically it could, particularly for smaller councils, be a huge impost at a time when they're already under pressure. But for us too, the cost of our public transport system is probably our biggest vulnerability here, and we need to take that seriously as a lifeline service as well as our broader aims of reducing emissions, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, well, the conversations around those are almost non-existent, to the extent that I just don't think they know. And whilst you're boldly saying we can definitely get fuel, it's a statement in itself that's possibly not fully able to be backed. And I should imagine they're worried about agricultural sectors and other things way before they think about councils and buses. So the conversation is that I don't think they know. And so blandishments aren't going to help at this stage. We've got a series of zones we're going to go through, and we have I've read what the council's response to that, and it's a very good response. It's got lots of pages and red bits and green bits, and it's well thought through. But that's assuming that things don't get a whole lot worse, which they could quite easily. There hasn't been, to be fair to say it, I don't think the guy who started this whole thing off thought through what was going to happen. So it's a bit hard to expect somebody in a small island at the bottom of the world to have it much thought out better either. Just what we need to do is be prepared and flexible, and that's the best that we can do here. We are lucky we do have some electric cars and electric buses, but when you look at it, this is the government that removed the incentive to have electric cars so you could have diesel Ford Rangers. Well, that doesn't look all that clever just at the moment. So we just got to wait and see. So I think that we should be observant, flexible, and careful. And we have Councillor Hills.
Thank you. Just
You're
first,
riding a bicycle.
first I got the bus in. Today it was electric. Just a question for Ross first, and it is just on the rates cap situation. I think I said at the time that because we will have suddenly a technical hold on revenue, it raises our can raise our borrowing costs. I mean, it was mentioned by Moody's as a sudden risk to us now because we're not technically sovereign now. We have to beg for it. Is it right that even 0.5%, if the rates cap does affect our borrowing costs, is it right even a 0.5% could add $70 million to our OPEX, which is equivalent to 2.5% rates increase anyway?
I think that's the right order of magnitude. There's two components. If our credit rating is downgraded, that will add borrowing costs through the credit margin. If interest rates go up because of just global trends, that also adds cost. We have some hedging in the short term, but longer term, that doesn't provide us with full cover forever. So yeah, the impact of rates capping gives us a very small margin of error. At the moment, our forward projection is 3.5% rates increases. If the rates cap is around 4%, that gives us a very small buffer, and any movement in interest rates could blow that out of the water pretty quickly. So we will be in a very constrained position, not a lot of flexibility, and our ability to cope with any uncertainty, such as the fuel situation or anything else that comes our way, will just be harder and harder.
So even before the Iran war, I think the Reserve Bank were already forecasting far higher inflation than originally forecasted. So that on top of this, on top of rates capping, could take about 4% of rates just on interest cost changes due to government. So we'll have a rates cap.
Very early days, very hard to speculate. But yes, I mean, they could easily take us from 3.5% to 4%, just minor fluctuations in future interest rates, because of credit rating issues or any kind of just general economic trends. At the moment, it's really uncertain what the impact of fuel costs might mean. It could mean lower growth, higher inflation, sort of stagflation environment going forward, which is kind of the worst of all worlds situation. That stuff will be we'll have to keep a close eye on that and monitor it through the LTP. But the rates capping gives us very limited room to move.
Seems counterintuitive, but okay. On the fuel, and thank you so much for the plan, and thanks for Pearl for meeting with Julie and I on this. I guess it's a question for Phil or Pearl. Do you feel like we have enough signals out there right now to the organisation to not necessarily conserve fuel right now, because we know that we're not at that stage, but just because of these ballooning costs, we're paying almost double what we were in January for diesel each week. So are we doing enough to try and conserve the amount of fuel being used to save money right now, not just conserve fuel?
Well, it's fair to say I would describe what we're doing as a measured response, a sort of proportionate response. So yes, there's been active communications into this organisation, likewise Auckland Transport, likewise Watercare, into their organisations about this. We are advantaged in terms of what's in our immediate control by the proportion of electric vehicles in the fleet and so on. So yeah, I think we're about right for where things sit at the moment. Monitoring the situation for sure, and if the government's system kicks it up a gear, then proportionately we'll have to do a little bit more, and possibly can.
Thank you. And I asked Phil this question, it was in confidential at appointments, but maybe it's a question for Richard around, similar to Councillor Ferry, the pop-up bus lanes, or I'm noticing a whole lot more kids on scooters and bikes right now, obviously because it's the freest form of transport. But is there a top 10 list that Stacey has, or you guys have of things you could do quickly, things that we could roll out that make it safe, stuff near schools? I asked Phil, is there a bit of a lag because of the transition that you're feeling like we don't want to put too much out there right now because we're coming within council? I don't know, but it does feel like we're maybe not using the crisis to jump on board. Talking to scooter and bike shop owners on the shore, they're getting 150% increase in sales. So we're going to have a safety issue as well as, how do we get access for more people to be doing these things? If it gets worse, especially.
To support your comments on the increased use of cycling in active mode, so our cycle counts are 16% up compared to last year, and bike hubs and bike shops are telling us that they're a lot busier as well. But as Phil says, measured response right now, putting pop-ups for cycle lanes would mean taking away from roading private vehicles on roads, so look forward to working with the road controlling authority in the future as we need to make changes to support that. But yes, again, we've got a list of ideas and locations that we could put pop-ups in and how we would better support people using active modes if we start seeing Aucklanders switching even more to active modes.
And I think to Councillor Ferry's point, there are plenty of examples where it might be one or two cars parked in a lane that creates massive delay for hundreds of people on buses. So I don't necessarily think those one or two drivers would be upset parking on a side road or whatever, but I think there's a lot of examples. The other one was, and I guess it is for the Mayor and Phil in your conversations, if you look at the Australian cities, I'm not asking for free public transport. I'd rather a lot more money go into more services than go free, but, the costs are going up crazy. Are we asking the government, the last government did come to us with pretty significant subsidies to help us through COVID. This seems like another, even $5 or $10 million would have a significant impact on our budget and enable us not to cut services. When you look at all the Australian cities, they're doing free or cheap or massive discounts for people to encourage public transport, and we're not enabled because our cost is going up quite significantly. Are we talking to them, asking them?
I've pointed out that they manufactured $50 that they didn't have to give to people to carry on driving their cars, which struck me as completely not making use of the opportunity to, and they'd be far better to just give those people a $50 bus ticket. There are equal numbers on either side of the opportunity to reduce costs or increase charges at the moment, and so there isn't a correct one-off answer to that. And again, in Australian cities, you've got to remember that there is probably 10 mayors in Sydney and even more in Melbourne. So it was a state government decision. We weren't again involved. I think they gave out the $50 to everybody just before they signed the city deal. But we will be talking to them about what we're going to do next. I think what we are doing with AT is that they're making better use of where they've got electric ones and diesel ones, because that hasn't been that clever either.
Okay.
We're aware of this, and it'll be a topic of conversation which will get more and more serious as and when war extends or stops. We don't know.
And the last question on that, I guess, is to advocacy. Oh, well, if you've got an answer, you could add to this as well, Phil. Just on so the government cut the $56 million for EV bus subsidies, and of course the $75 million towards our electric ferries, which was all about, they don't care that much about climate change or emissions. But if you look at it just from a cost perspective, it was already going to be a 60% saving on OPEX under the old price for diesel. It now must be mass increases in OPEX. So I'm just wondering if we should be writing to go. I'm happy to do it, but it's not my role. So, how can we ask for this type of thing to be looked at as a cost thing? If they don't want to touch climate change, that's fine. But a simple cost, we can show them the data that is significantly improves our cost over time, the OPEX.
Yeah, thanks. I think, and this relates to the question from Councillor Ferry earlier. We are in contact with government at an officials level. I think the best thing we can do at the moment is sort of advocacy, yes, but making sure that they're made fully aware of what the impacts are here. Of course, anything that we're spending in the transport space has a corresponding subsidy contribution from central government, more or less. These issues are confronting NZTA and their funding pressure as well. So, I I think there is an opportunity for us to kind of keep a level of tension on central government around the response, and be ready to advocate for more in the event that the situation gets worse. So,
We've had the lesson of COVID. When things get more expensive, people do less. Work from home, having finally got people to come back to work again, we're going to find that buggers go at home. So that's going to be another tricky thing. Who's next? Councillor Henderson?
Parul just had something to add.
I'm sorry,
there, Richard.
Parul.
If I may just add, Minister Bishop actually had a conversation with all the PT operators must be a month ago now, and that was to understand what are the issues that are facing the sector, and if we were to up PT by a big, really high, and cost did come up at that point as well. So I think they are quite aware of what it looks like. It's just that nothing has come back in terms of how could they help. But they are very aware of the fact that if PT is the only way people would be able to travel at that point in time, cost has to be thought through and how might that be supported.
Yeah, I think I'm not foreshadowing anything here other than the fact that we clearly need to keep monitoring this situation carefully. One of the likely responses from government will be, what are you doing to mitigate your own cost exposure here? Now that leads us down the path of having potentially serious conversations around this table about service levels and where we can economise, but necessarily understanding whether there's an impact on services. I think at that point it's some advice to yourselves and some discussions about the best response to this, and that's what's sort of foreshadowed, if necessary, in the memo to you earlier.
It's indeed a topic of conversation around the new board. How do we use the money better? And it may be some things get trimmed as well as. Okay, I'm sure everyone's working hard. They all understand the complexities here. Very hard to get a good answer. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Foreshadowing, I've got a question on the city deal around identified growth areas, but I'll do the fuel ones first. Don't know if you want Max to come help out in a moment, but I'm just letting you know. Okay, just around the fuel stuff, I've got a couple of cues. So first and foremost, this is really great. Like it's awesome that we get a chance to talk about this at committee, and hopefully as the crisis develops and evolves, we show a bit of leadership on responses, and this will be the vehicle for that. So I suppose my question is, are we envisaged to have future briefings on this topic as we're going, and how frequent would we be doing that?
As I mentioned, the guidance from government is still evolving, and once we have clearer indication of what that looks like around bans, we will bring back to you a revised version of the plan for your information.
Cool. Through this, I have concerns not just about how we're balancing our own budget as a council organisation, but how the city's faring, how household budgets are faring, and how our GDP is faring. So I noticed that we can model traffic congestion costing the city X billion dollars a year, right? We've had that released. I'm wondering if we have data to show how much fuel cost rises will affect the GDP and economic activity of Auckland.
I think that is some work that has been asked for to be done, not yet at the moment.
We can take that up with Gary, the chief economist. Yeah.
Awesome. And just to piggyback off that, a related sort of point maybe to take to Gary as well, is whether we're getting data on the impact in sort of dollar terms on people's actual household budgets and their kitchen table spend. So not just GDP wide, but struggling family and Auckland wide as well. If we can do that too, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll ask Gary to circulate to you a bit of advice on this, his reading of the situation and how the scenario might unfold.
Fantastic. I might sort of save the rest of my stuff for debate. Can I jump to the city deal?
Max is going to come and save me.
Thank you, Max.
Just while you're at it, though, it's not just struggling families, there's struggling businesses out there.
Absolutely.
And some of the large businesses are struggling, which will have an impact on a lot of families. So we've got to sort of get ourselves out of the family kitchen room and look at right across the whole economy. There's a number of sudden developments are stalled at the moment, which aren't going to be encouraged by this sort of stuff. There's all sorts of market things. One last thing I would like to share there, we met with all the major developers last week, and the message they had is that there's more land available in the city now than they can use for many years. So there isn't any need for more subdivisions outside the area as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, couldn't agree more actually, and concern about any question of working from home mandates, etc. That'll really slam our businesses in Auckland City in particular. But I had planned to come back to that, so I might come back to that. Max, first Q, what's the practical element of being an identified growth area as opposed to not being one? What actually happens, and what changes?
Sorry, Councillor, when you identified growth area, do you mean, are you speaking of the...
Four listed in the
priority locations. What they represent are locations which the Crown and Council have agreed to work together on. And in each case, there are specific things that we have agreed to work together on. So they're not an attempt to sort of provide an exhaustive list of areas we might prioritise investment as a council. So the practical implication is that through the Auckland deal framework, which we'll be establishing, the Crown and the Council will work together on those initiatives.
Thank you. I suppose I ask because I have some concerns about kind of the forgotten cousin of the family being Westgate and Red Hills, and whether you envisage, and it might be a full question as well, there'll be less resourcing from this council going to that area for planning and development because we've identified other areas.
Well, I'll give it a first go, and might get saved by my boss here. The simple answer is that the deal, you will be making separate decisions around how we allocate the council's resources, and there are, we'll be taking some information to you collectively as part of the long-term planning process around how you might prioritise investment spatially. And we'll have some sessions in terms of the long-term planning direction setting soon on that. So the deal doesn't make that decision for you. What it does is it represents a commitment for us to work together with the Crown, and so it might be a factor that you take into account when you make those decisions, but it doesn't decide for you whether certain areas will receive less investment.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate that. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I think those are my cues. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, that's all the questions I've got here. So, sorry, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, two questions. One on the fuel crisis, and in light of some of the comments that have been made in our interactions with the government, there is a reason that we're in this situation, just like other big chunks of the world. I guess it's the purview of the government to decide on what that response is on the international scene, perhaps less than emphatic thus far. So my question is, as far as us and our new conversations with the government, I would be expecting us to be articulating very clearly what the on-the-ground consequences are for the people of Auckland. Obviously, this has been signalled for months that this is at best is going to have a very long tail. So I just, in terms of political advocacy, I'm just curious to know what approach, if any, we may have to making that very clear to the government what the consequences are for Auckland. And I'm thinking of perhaps more detail than just saying, the price of diesel's gone up or whatever. What there are spin-on effects, like Councillor Henderson was referring to, that go to the population.
Well, I won't stray too much into the national political analysis, but it does go to that point of robustly monitoring what the situation was, what the effects are, both organisationally, as others have said, and at a community level. We just, there has been communication of those impacts to central government, but we just need to keep that up and provide that view in clear, uncertain terms.
Yeah. New Zealand may have to try and become a little bit more pointed than it's been done thus far. Just final question to continue that theme of conversation with the government, and it goes to the Auckland deal. I'm not quite sure who's best to answer this, but I heard the interview of the Mayor with Jack Tame on Sunday night, and it certainly what didn't appear too promising. I think the recurring adjective there was underwhelming and worse, and it's only just started. So in this deal, I think it's anticipated it lasts 10 years or decade or thereabouts, and there is provision for a 5-year review. So I guess if we take the old maxim of, starting the way you mean to go on in terms of what the experience has been thus far, according to what's been fed back to us anyway, what is the ability to look at that earlier than waiting 5 years? Because if it is a big disappointment or a letdown, or it's largely just serving a kind of political window dressing, then presumably we wouldn't want 5 years to make that apparent. So that comment's based on the feedback we've received of things thus far.
A not unreasonable comment at all. I mean, basically, not wait 5 years. Every time they're doing something wrong, we remind them immediately about what is in there. It was always going to be somewhat difficult. It was their idea, it wasn't ours. And they have more incentive to make it work than we do, so that they don't like being reminded, and they are adjusting their behaviour accordingly. And I think they'll probably bitterly regret signing the thing in the fullness of time. There's more pressure to come. We've got the 30-year transport plan coming up, which is well and truly mentioned in that and in the legislation which has just passed. We're waiting for the royal assent, whatever that is. I think we just got to keep constantly battling our side. It's like in any negotiation, you don't wait around 5 years if it's not going well, you talk immediately. And so we will be doing that. And any input you've got, you're welcome to give it to me, and I'll carry it forward. So I welcome your points. It is we're trying to overcome decades of a behaviour of a parent towards a child, and it's going to take a bit of them getting used to the fact that it's no longer that.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I guess my question probably more aimed at in the actual, agreement, which I don't know if it's still legally privileged or not, or is it, Phil? No, it's on the open now. Yeah, okay. Just in the agreement, when you looks at the terms and the reviews, it seems to be a little light on follow-up in terms of a situation where, where things don't proceed as envisaged outside of this 5 years. It requires changes that are signed by each party. So I'm just wondering, in practical terms, what your view is of any need that short of that 5-year term where you just say, well, this isn't working, it's not serving the effect, and you might cut the strings. I mean, it's too early to be saying that, of course, but I'm just looking at the mechanisms that are in the agreement.
I mean, I understand the concern, and I think about this as being in a bit of a change process. As the Mayor said, we're trying to fundamentally change the way that the relationship with central government operates, away from more of a parent-child one to something different. It'll take time. It's not going to be all smooth sailing, but you know, shoot me for being naive, but I think we've got to approach this in a positive way, and with a view to what the deal might achieve and how the relationship might mature over time, and come to that with sort of a bit of positivity and goodwill. I'm not directing that at anyone, but you know, I think if we start early on in a slightly defeatist mode, then that's exactly what will happen. So.
I mean, there are some things in there that aren't going to wait 5 years, like the bed night levy. Had we had 3 different parties getting together, that would be in now. But one was one stumbling block, and so we've said we'll definitely have a big discussion about that next year, or later on this year when there's a change. So we're not waiting 5 years. It's sort of an iterative document, really. We just got to keep working on it, like a forced marriage, really. Councillor Newman's wishes to add in here, and welcome. You're next up.
Good afternoon. Phil, can I just understand organisationally, notwithstanding the political debates around this, an Auckland deal which was signed on the 10th of April this year, so 25 days ago, 25 days old deal, that the organisation will make its best endeavour organisationally to work with the government officials to give effect to the intent of the Auckland deal, regardless of the political landscape, either at local government or central government. Until you are directed otherwise, the organisation just effectively commits to the deal and tries to make good with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, precisely right, and that's what's happening at the moment. And the deal actually anticipates some formal mechanisms around that, and we're getting those in place with central government officials now.
And in the 25 days or whatever it is since the deal was signed, that officials have been working expeditiously with departmental officials to try and say, well, this is what the consequence of this will mean, and that we operationally this is how we give effect to this, etc., etc. That's how this conversation's working.
Yes.
Okay, I've got no further speakers, so would you like to retire? And thank you for the work that you're doing in facing uncertain times. Beg your pardon? I'll move this, and the Deputy Mayor will second this, so we can have a discussion. Is there anyone? I think it got fairly well discussed in amongst the questions. On that basis, I will move this. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, second. Carried, rather. The next 3 items are very procedural, and I'm hoping to take the liberty of moving all 3, 7.3, 7.4 and 7.5 as a group. Is there a seconder brave enough for that? Councillor Baker. I'll move that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, carried. Then we're going to have the next one. It's a procedural motion to exclude the public. That'll be moved by Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried. So I'll call this stopped for 10 minutes while Sandra